So June had a lot of new Nintendo Switch games that I was interested in, and July does as well, so make sure you guys check out that video. But I've been playing a bunch of games this June, and I thought to myself, you know, it'd be nice to put these games sort of in a compilation video, to talk about what games I have been playing and see if they are worth picking up for your Nintendo Switch. So that's exactly what we're going to do in this video today. We're going to take a look at 3 newly released Nintendo Switch games for the month of June and see if they're worth your money. So if this is your first time on the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button, be sure to like the video as well. But without any further ado, let's talk about these new Nintendo Switch games and see if they're worth picking up. The first game we're going to talk about is a game that was introduced to us during E3 2021 during Nintendo's Nintendo Direct presentation, and it was a game that I had never heard of, and it was a game called Strange Brigade. Now, evidently this game released a couple of years ago on the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, but I had never heard of this game. There seemed to be some mixed reactions to the game online as well, as a lot of people were like, well, it's not really that good of a game, who cares? But I was interested in the game because I liked the aesthetic of the game. It reminded me a lot of like The Mummy from 1999 starring Brendan Fraser, or maybe even some Indiana Jones style films as well with that ancient Egypt setting. So I ended up picking up Strange Brigade, and honestly, I'm really enjoying this game. The way the game works is essentially you play as one of the 4 members of a team called the Strange Brigade, who goes into these areas in search of treasure, taking out enemies, and trying to bring peace back to the world. Now what's cool about this game is that it has drop in and drop out online multiplayer, meaning that you could join someone else's game, play a few rounds with them, and then just leave on your own leisure. The one thing that's nice about the game is that the game seems to scale as well. So if you're playing solo within the levels, you basically get a little bit of an easier experience, whereas when you have multiple people playing with you, the challenge does get a bit harder. The whole time you're playing the game, you're basically blasting through waves of different enemies and of course collecting money. This money is then used to buy better weapons, and there's also upgrades that you can find within the levels as well that will upgrade your weapons and do some pretty cool stuff with them. One thing that I liked is that there's puzzles scattered throughout the levels as well. Now, most of these puzzles are just optional things, and basically if you're able to solve the puzzle, you'll then be rewarded with some more treasure, some money, maybe a hidden relic and whatnot. But there are a few puzzles that are mandatory, and that's one of the areas that the game does feel a bit weak. Because if you're playing by yourself, it's fine. You're in control of this puzzle, and you can do things to manipulate this puzzle. But if you're playing with others, they can sort of manipulate this puzzle in a way that doesn't really make sense. And since the game doesn't offer any voice chat, it can be very annoying. Now, aside from the main story of the game, there's actually a horde mode as well and some extra missions. There's additional DLC you can purchase too, but I wasn't too interested in that. I just wanted to play the main core experience. The game looks and runs pretty well too, all things considered that it's running on the Nintendo Switch. There's some really nice graphics, some really nice lighting effects. The frame rate stays mostly consistent. Sometimes it does get a bit bogged down when there's a bunch of enemies on screen, but this is pretty few and far between. Now, like I said, this game did release on the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One a couple years ago, and because of that, you can pick up those versions of the game much cheaper than you can the Nintendo Switch version. But if you only own a Nintendo Switch, I think this is a really fun game. It would have been nice to have some voice chat included in the game as well, and some of the puzzles, like I said, can be a bit complicated when you're playing with others online. But overall, I've been having a blast with this game. I have definitely enjoyed it way more than I expected to, and it's a game that I could see myself playing in the future as well, because of things like randomized puzzles in which it makes it different every time you play the game. Definitely an interesting game on the Nintendo Switch, but definitely a game I recommend checking out if this gameplay footage looks good to you and what I said about the game sounds interesting enough. Next up, we're going to talk about one of the biggest hit games on the Nintendo Switch, Balan Wonderworld. I'm just kidding, I'm never going to play this game because Metroid Dread isn't going to sell over 3 million copies. Sealed it stays. The real next game we're going to talk about is the Ninja Gaiden Master Collection. Now this of course consists of 3 different Ninja Gaiden games featuring Ninja Gaiden 2, and Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge. We're not going to really talk about Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge because I don't really like this game, to be honest with you. And the Nintendo Switch version of this game just, I don't know, it has some problems. There's some frame rate issues. It targets 60 frames per second, but there's definitely some slowdown. It's kind of pixelated as well at times. I don't know, it's just not really a good game to begin with, so this was the game that I did not care about from this collection. But Ninja Gaiden and Ninja Gaiden 2 I was definitely really looking forward to, as I enjoyed playing these games back in the day, and it's been a very long time. So the original Ninja Gaiden came out on the Xbox, and I would say this is more of a traditional ninja style experience. Now the game looks and runs great. It's mostly at 60 frames per second with very little slowdown, if at all. The graphics themselves look very nice and clean, but this is definitely a challenging game, and all of the Ninja Gaiden games are challenging, but I would say this is more of an old school challenge in which that you will die a lot. You could get in a single fight that you think you are in control of the game and everything is going well, and the next thing you know, you're dead. It definitely plays more like a traditional older style Ninja Gaiden game. Don't really think of like a Devil May Cry style. Think of a more slower, methodical pace in which you have to be very tactical, but I think this game is a lot of fun, and it definitely still holds up today. You of course get special abilities as you play throughout the game. There's a storefront where you can buy different weapons and of course upgrade these weapons and get things like potions to make your adventure a little bit easier, but it's definitely the most challenging game out of the three, but I still think it's a lot of fun. Now Ninja Gaiden 2 is honestly one of the best action adventure games of all time, and I forgot how good this game was until I played it again in this collection, and holy shit man, I absolutely love this game. I think it's one of the best action adventure games of all time, and it still holds up today because it still has that original Ninja Gaiden feeling, but it does feel a bit more modern as there's things like deeper combos and of course better graphics than you saw with the first game, and this game is just absolutely outstanding. You get so many different weapons, you're put into so many different interesting situations, huge hulking boss battles as well. The story itself is interesting enough, and the visual style actually still holds up in the modern era. Now there are a few complaints that I have with the visuals in the Nintendo Switch version of the game. Basically it comes down to dynamic scaling. What ends up happening is if there's a lot of enemies on screen, the game will get a bit pixelated, but as you take out like one or two of the enemies, the game will adjust the resolution in order to get rid of that pixelization, which is more than likely happening because they want to keep that 60 frames per second. But this is pretty few and far between. Most of your experience with this game is absolutely fantastic, and seriously, if you only played one game in this collection, I feel like this game is worth that $40 price point on its own. Now of course this also released on the PlayStation 4, it doesn't quite have the visual problems that the Nintendo Switch version of the game has, and of course if you have an Xbox you can play these games via Game Pass, and the original versions of the game, not the Sigma versions of the game which are featured in this, that do have some adjustments done to them. But overall I really like this collection. Ninja Gaiden 3, Razor's Edge, whatever, but Ninja Gaiden and Ninja Gaiden 2 are fantastic games. They feel different enough to make you want to play each of the games, but Ninja Gaiden 2 is an absolute masterpiece. If this game isn't one of the best action adventure games of all time in your opinion, I just think you're wrong. And the final game we're going to talk about is Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2 Remastered for the Nintendo Switch. Now, if you know anything about me, I'm an old school skateboarder. I used to skateboard for many, many years. It's probably why my knees and my back are all screwed up. But the Tony Hawk games back in the day were just absolutely amazing. Like, everyone played them. It got people to want to try and skateboard, and then I'm sure it led to a lot of injuries. And of course, this compilation came out last year on the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One. I ended up picking up the Xbox One version. I got the collector's edition that came with a skateboard, but I wanted to play this game on my Nintendo Switch because of handheld mode. I thought it would be great to play these games on the Nintendo Switch, and I'm proud to say that the ports of these games are absolutely fantastic on the Switch. So as the title suggests, this is a combination of both Tony Hawk 1 and Tony Hawk 2, with essentially remastered graphics, pretty much built from the ground up. Yes, the levels themselves are still the same, all the items are still in the same locations, but their better graphics obviously are the star of the show, and I think that they did a really good job of porting this game over to the Nintendo Switch. You don't get quite the high graphical fidelity that you got in the Xbox One version of the game, but for the most part, the game looks absolutely fantastic. It does run at 30 frames per second versus the 60 frames per second that the Xbox and the PlayStation versions ran at, but really for me this wasn't a big deal. The games still feel very smooth, and this is a constant 30 frames per second with just an occasional random dip here and there, but definitely not worth talking about. The levels themselves are still very fun to play. The gameplay still definitely holds up. Most of the original songs from the games are in there, and there's some new songs included as well. There's some new skaters included as well. Of course, you have the Create a Skater, Create a Park mode, and there's online multiplayer as well. Now, the online multiplayer surprisingly runs really good on the Nintendo Switch. It's very fast, it's very smooth. I didn't have any sort of lag issues or anything like that, and you can play all the different modes in the online mode, and it's a lot of fun to play these modes. I really don't have any complaints about Tony Hawk 1 and 2 remastered for the Nintendo Switch besides, well, one thing. The load times can be a bit obnoxious in this game. Now, if you're already within a level and you just restart the level, it's fine. But if you're going to a new level, it seems like the loading times are a bit longer than they should be. I've obviously been playing as Chad Muska in all my footage. I am a Chad Muska fan. I had the Chad Muska skateboard back in the day with that Cadillac Escalade or something it was called. I had the Muska Beats rap album too. You didn't have that when you were growing up. It was actually pretty good though. There was a bunch of different people on there like Ice-T, members of Wu-Tang Clan, KRS-One were on the album. A very fun album. But yes, Tony Hawk 1 and 2 remastered for the Nintendo Switch is a very solid port. If you only own a Nintendo Switch, I definitely recommend checking this game out. The online is fun. The single player is fun. There's a bunch of stuff to do, a bunch of stuff to do with your characters as well. There's little challenges within the game too to keep you wanting to play, and it's just a very solid game overall. Alright, so those are some new Nintendo Switch games that I've been playing lately. Let me know in the comments section down below if you have played any of these games, or if you plan on picking up any of these games. I really think all three of these games are awesome. Yeah, you might be able to get them cheaper on other consoles, but if you only own a Nintendo Switch, I definitely recommend all three of these games. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you are new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Be sure to like and share the video as well if you enjoyed it. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Later.